Perfect. So I think we're going to get going. So hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's wonderful to have you here on Quad's webinar. Before we got started, I do have a couple of housekeeping rules, so to speak. Just want to let you know that this webinar is recorded and you will receive a recording in your email within the next couple of days. We encourage you to rewatch it, send it to your network, or just save it in case you do need it for your any sort of review. We do have a question and answer chat box open, as well as a chat box, a general chat box for you. Towards the end of the webinar, we'll open that up and we'll give Jennifer an opportunity to answer some of those questions. We're looking at running this webinar for about 45 minutes, 30 minutes of content with 45 minutes devoted to the actual, 15 minutes, I should say, devoted to that Q&A that we mentioned earlier. Yes, we already got a couple of questions in. How long is the webinar? 45 minutes, 30 of content, and then that Q&A. A little bit of an agenda. So we have our introductions, which we'll go over in a minute. We'll be speaking about what Ivy League schools are looking for. We'll speak about tailoring your application strategy, choosing activities and displaying academic excellence, tips to elevate your application, and of course that Q&A. Just before I pass it off to Jennifer, I'm excited to share a little bit more about who we are at Quad and what we offer. Quad Education is a globally recognized college admissions consulting firm with the largest team of admissions counselors in the world. With a 98% success rate, our students are 11 times more likely to get accepted at their top choice colleges. We assist students from 6th grade to undergraduate transfer candidates in applying to their dream schools. We are firm believers in starting the college application process as early as possible. For our middle schoolers and early high schoolers, we offer college candidacy and profile development. This process focuses on building each student's resume to highlight their strengths. We want the candidate to stand out, so we will work with your student to identify clubs and leadership positions, find extracurricular activities and volunteer opportunities, and assist in creating next year's class schedule. Our college development program extends outside of the classroom and the regular school year, of course. Since schools are looking at much more than academics these days, our counselors always help plan summer activities. These can include summer courses, internships, shadowing, research opportunities, and giving back to the community through encouraging students to create service projects. Once we've helped shape an outstanding candidate, we extend our support to shaping the perfect application. We're here to help with comprehensive application support, from picking the right major to building a balanced list of schools, activity list creation, obtaining letters of recommendation, interview preparation, and applying to scholarships. Our admissions counselors are also essay writing experts who will brainstorm, outline, and edit your supplemental essays and personal statements until they are perfect. These essays serve as a platform to showcase the best aspects of our students, drawing connections between their individual life journeys and overarching themes of each school they apply to. Whether it's your main application or extra essays for scholarships, we've got your back with unlimited edits. Overall, our goal is to build the perfect candidate and application. We utilize every tool in our skill set to ensure the products we create with our students stand out from the rest of the pack. If you're interested in learning more about us and our packages, we do offer personalized consultations, whether that's via video, phone, or email, ensuring individualized support. Our admissions counselors are always ready and willing to help you through the process, so you don't have to navigate it alone, no matter where you are in the application process. With that being said, I'd love to introduce you to Jennifer White, who is our expert panelist today. Marina, unfortunately, was not able to make it, but we do have Jennifer here.
Yes, we do.
You want to introduce yourself and then we can get going?
Definitely. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted that you made the time to be with me this evening, and I'm looking forward to sharing some insights from my experience as an admissions consultant with Quad and prior experiences as well, to help you get ready to apply to the Ivy League schools of your dreams. I did my undergraduate studies at Harvard. I earned my bachelor's in English and East Asian studies, focusing on Japan, and then graduated with a magna cum laude degree, worked for the university's program on U.S.-Japan relations for a few years, and then myself was off to Japan for my graduate studies. which I enjoyed tremendously. It was such a fun time. And then I directed study abroad programs for several decades at institutions across the US, including Washington University in St. Louis and others, helped grow Fulbright programs and acceptances at each of those institutions as well. And throughout, I was involved in some admissions committee work for international students at each of those schools. And I was also, throughout that time, an alumni interviewer for Harvard. And so I can, comment a little bit on what my experience in the alumni interviewing program was like. So we're going to be looking this evening, obviously, at how to best position yourself to be a strong candidate for Ivy League institutions. And there, it's like a necessary but not sufficient list here. Schools are looking for students who excel academically and really can bring and contribute something unique to the institution, bringing diverse perspectives, et cetera, and really contributing holistically to the life of the institution. Among the qualities that schools in the Ivy League are looking for are academic excellence, leadership, and impact in your extracurricular activities. They want to see strong personal qualities and character traits. Obviously, your essays and letters of recommendation are going to be carefully evaluated. They're increasingly looking for diversity and unique perspectives among their entering class, and really making efforts to ensure that they have a more representative student body in their entering classes. It's very important that you can show passion and real engagement intellectually with your chosen field of study. That authenticity is very highly valued, and interviews, if offered, are a very important part of the application process. Not all schools offer interviews, but where they are offered, we do strongly encourage that you take advantage of that opportunity. So we're going to take a look a bit at accepted student stats for the recent years. You can see here, we're talking about single digit acceptance rates, average SAT scores in the mid 1500s, average ACT scores in the upper range, and average GPAs in the upper range as well. These are overall figures, so they average out the early decision or restrictive early action, those November 1st deadline applications, along with the regular decision applications that are due in January. So these figures are compiled. Also, the average SAT scores are really just a guideline. Most schools now that they're transitioning back to test mandatory for upcoming application cycles, the real scores that are being sought are 1570s and 1580s for the top 25% of admitted students into these top schools. Now, we need to think about how can you best position yourself and create a compelling application strategy. I can't emphasize enough the importance of researching your schools as you're applying to them. You need to have a reason why you see a fit between your interests and who you are as a person and who you are as a student, and what you can bring to the institution. It's not just a name brand grab. You can't just say, oh, it'd be so cool to go to Yale or Stanford or Dartmouth, wherever you might be aiming for. You really need to have clearly articulated in your mind and in your application materials that fit between yourself and by the institution. And the way that we accomplish that is by doing really detailed research on the curriculum, on the faculty, on research opportunities that you'll have, on extracurricular opportunities, on the mission and value statements of each school, et cetera. And then the other piece of this process is to really know yourself by doing self-reflection and really being able to articulate the values and life experiences that have shaped who you are and how you'll be able to contribute your own unique perspective to the student life on campus. Again, looking for that alignment with the school's mission is very key. And throughout, we want to make sure that you have a compelling and cohesive narrative that's really going to explain that fit and how you see yourself making the best use of the available resources that will be presented to you as a student at that institution. Again, as we're looking through your activity list and your resume, we're going to be choosing a few extracurricular activities that really have allowed you to make an impact. This is can be a very traditional leadership position that you might have had in student government or robotics club or a sports team, but it can also be a passion project that you started, a nonprofit on your own and really made an impact in your community. This can take all kinds of different shapes, but it's important that, again, there's this cohesion and continuity in your narrative. And increasingly in this world of AI generated text and everything, it's very important that you maintain your individual personalized voice in your essays so that it looks and sounds and feels like you. And I know when I'm working with my students and doing essay revisions, I'm making suggestions for content and how to position and express something, but I'm always very careful to maintain the applicant's voice in the process. Sometimes students will come in and say, oh, could you just, help me rewrite this paragraph? And I'll guide them through it, but the writing needs to be the students and the voice needs to be from the individual student. Lastly, some schools do require a resume. And so we do work on that together, highlighting all of your relevant experiences, your achievements. And then there is an opportunity that you have in the various applications to explain any kind of gap in your educational progression, any issue that you might have had starting out high school, or you had a rough semester, whatever it is, it's just important to contextualize it for the admissions committee so that they're able to see how that experience shaped you and how it has helped you to grow as an individual. So now we're going to be looking a little bit at how to choose your activities and how to highlight your academic excellence and experience. All of these things are very important. We want to be looking at, maybe you've done 20, 25 different activities. They're not all going to be able to make it into your college application, and that's okay. We're going to highlight relevant, really standout achievements or accomplishments that you've had. Maybe you're an aspiring professional musician. You've had a ton of competitive wins. We're going to be highlighting those competitions. There's a whole process for submitting portfolios when you're applying to a field in the arts. That's an experience unto itself. That's very important to get all of that right. So we would be, focusing in on something like that for an arts-based student. For a student who's going into the STEM field, we're going to want to highlight any research publication experiences that you might have had. Many of my students have made the opportunity to present at a conference, part of their high school experience. So we'll definitely highlight that. We want to be thinking about what's going to help you stand out from the other applicants who are applying with your excellent scores and your excellent GPA. We're looking here at quality versus quantity. We really encourage you to be pursuing leadership roles in your different experiences. And then also schools really value community service, volunteering, and impact either in your school community or your home community, your neighborhood, or beyond. And so we'll be thinking about those kinds of projects and activities that really made an impact in where you call home. And we will highlight your academic achievements and look at how to really weave in the advanced coursework that you've taken. Many students in STEM fields, for example, will progress beyond the offerings at their school and do enrollment in a community college or other academic institution for their junior or senior year coursework. And so we want to make sure to highlight that. Not many schools rank anymore, at least among schools that I've been primarily working with, but we do want to look at your weighted and your unweighted GPA and talk about, how you got there, and not just your great scores, but what you learned and how that has informed your goals for your academic major. And then again, back to the standardized test score discussion, these are coming back as an expected part of the application. Schools have been completely overwhelmed with less than qualified applicants since they went test optional. And so that's some of the thinking behind switching back to test mandatory, is to just say, here are our expectations for academic ability at these top schools. And it gives schools a very straightforward way to evaluate that academic achievement. Okay, now we're going to think about how can you elevate your own individual application and how can you stand out. It's very, very important that you have a really amazing personal statement. And we spend a lot of time working with our rising seniors in their application process on choosing a topic that's going to be unique and connected into the overall application strategy. And is going to really give the student an opportunity to express their individual voice and their experiences. Really, you want to be thinking of something that's allowed you to grow, that's helped shape your development, your values. And then we definitely work on the flow of the piece, make sure that it's engaging, highly readable, and that it will be something that sticks in the application reader's mind long after they've read your essay. I didn't work with anyone when I was applying to schools. I just wrote on my own and had my school counselor kind of help me with the application nuts and bolts. But I had a very formative experience when I was working at my family's dental practice as a high school student, as a front office administrative assistant. And one day the dental hygienist quit, walked off the job, left a patient in a chair, and my dentist came out and said, okay, it's your turn. And I got on the job training of how to be a dental assistant and did that for several months until they found someone else to take on the role. And so that's what I wrote my college essay about, believe it or not. And I met the admissions team that reviewed my essay at an event in my sophomore year, and they remembered that essay. I'm like, how can you remember that essay? You read thousands of these things. I guess nobody had written about that at the time. But you want to have something that is really going to stick with your readers, and that they're going to be able to remember you by a clear anecdote, and then how you describe what you learned from that experience is really key. So choosing compelling topics, something that's personally significant, reflects your unique experiences and values is really key, and really highlights the contributions that you can make to the academic institution. Now, letters of recommendation are super important. And it's very important that you have letters from core subject teachers who know you both inside and outside the classroom. The best letters that my students have been able to procure has been letters that highlight the students' contributions in the classroom. And then maybe, their CS teacher was also the advisor for their robotics team. And so they were able to comment on the students' leadership experience and contributions to the team in a non-classroom setting. So if you have a teacher who has that kind of a place in your life as a student, that's a great person to cultivate a relationship with and to approach early in the spring of your junior year to ask about the possibility for them to write a letter of recommendation for you. We don't advise that you choose someone from sophomore year unless there are compelling circumstances that make that necessary. You're really looking at junior year teachers or someone that you had maybe in sophomore year, but you're going to TA for them in your senior year or otherwise maintain an ongoing connection so that they can comment on your development since your sophomore or earlier years. Different teachers are going to have different processes for how they want to receive your materials. They'll ask for a brag sheet. They'll have an online form that you fill out. They'll sit down and talk with you one-on-one. They'll ask for a copy of your essay, or they won't want a copy of your essay. So it's just really important to ask your teacher in person and then follow up with an email, assuming that they agree. Follow up with the email that confirms that they're going to be writing your letter and asking for any follow-on instructions, and then make sure that you do that promptly. I've had some students tell me that, my bio teacher only writes 15 letters per year, and it's the first 15 people who ask, right? There's all kinds of crazy ways that teachers set things up. So you just have to know what their expectations and rules are and go by those. And then back to the resume, you're going to want to focus in after you've got the content set. You want to focus in on the formatting and making sure that it's easy to read, because your whole application is going to get a skim. It's not going to, go home with people and be digested for hours on end. They're reading multiple files an hour, and there's a turnaround time that they have to get through these things. So you want to make it easy to, capture all of the relevant highlights. Canva and other formatting tools are great, provide great templates for this, and you can really choose something that reflects you and makes yourself stand out a bit. Now, if you've had the opportunity to engage in work experience, research experience, or an internship that is connected to your academic field of study and what you'd like to major in and do beyond college, this is something that's very key to work towards in your junior summer in high school, and that will really help you enhance the strength of your application and make a compelling argument, again, for why you say you're interested in chemistry. Okay, great. Show me how interested you are. Well, I've done this in the school. I've done this outside of school. I've done this in my summers. I've done this kind of publication with a professor in my local area, et cetera, et cetera. That's where it gets really important to show that you've put in a lot of time and effort beyond your classroom experiences. Okay, and then as I mentioned early on in the call, there is the option to apply early to one school in a binding capacity, which is called the Early Decision Program. Of the different Ivy League institutions, not all offer an early decision program, and some of them, like Cornell last year, will change their policy in the middle of the application cycle. So one of my seniors graduating this year had the dream of going to Cornell last year. We worked really hard on her early decision application, submitted it all well in advance of the November 1 deadline. And then right around Thanksgiving, Cornell made the surprising announcement that they were reducing the number of students to be admitted through early decision. Would have been helpful to know in September, but we found out after the early decision deadline had passed. So she was deferred to the regular round and then was accepted in the regular round. Just had a little bit longer of a wait than we would have liked, but is going to her dream Ivy school. So the strange things like that happen. And there's nothing that anyone can do to control situations like that. So we work with the data and the information that we have to select the best fit Ivy for your individual academic goals. And then we decide if you like it enough that it can be your top choice school, then that becomes your early decision one school. And we put all the eggs in that basket and hope that you are able to be successful in that round. Depending on the school, there are higher chances of admission, sometimes twice as high, sometimes 1.5 times as high when you're promising to attend the school if you're admitted, which is the definition of the early decision. But there are other schools in the Ivy League, Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, that have the restricted early action program, single choice early action. And that is the same deadline. You can choose to apply to one of those schools offering that application plan. It doesn't give your application quite the boost as a binding early decision plan does, but it's an either or choice. You can't do both and. So that's very important to be doing all of your research early and knowing which school is going to be your best fit. With the single choice early action or restrictive early action program, you are not obligated to attend that institution if you are accepted. You'll find out on December 15th or 18th, just right around in that time frame before winter break, just like the early decision applicants. And you'll have until the May 1st commitment deadline to evaluate other admissions offers that you may be aspiring for and decide where you're going to go. So SCEA, REA offers a little bit more flexibility. ED, early decision, offers a bump in your admissions chances. And we sit down with our students and think very long and hard about which is going to be the best route for you, look at statistics, look at all of the things. So that's a little bit also about how you can improve your chances of admission at the Ivies.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, Jennifer.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
I'd absolutely love to turn it over to our audience for a Q&A. We have some questions. Yeah, we have some questions. I'd love to go through them if you're ready. Just wanted for a minute just to turn our audience's attention to the QR code on screen. If you have more specific questions or if you're interested in speaking to us one-on-one about yourself or your child or your students, I should say, application, please don't hesitate to reach out. It's a complimentary service, and we'd love to get to know you a little bit more. So let's get going. We sort of answered this already, but someone said, do I have a better chances of acceptance if I'm an early applicant?
Depending on the school and depending on your major, yes. Now, the thing to know about early decision plans, not just at the Ivy League schools, but anywhere, is that you're going to be competing against a smaller number of applicants than in the regular decision round. You're going to also be competing against a very highly qualified group of applicants. So in general, yes, it does hold true that statistically speaking, your chances of acceptance will be higher in the early decision round if you are a competitive student.
Hopefully that helps. Oh, we have a couple of questions. I love this regarding just ED and all of that. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked, and we have some questions on letters of recommendation that we'll get to as well. Someone says, still a little bit confused about REA. So if mm-hmm. I are REA to a school, then I can't EA or ED to any other school?
You can't ED. So there's this alphabet soup of acronyms for our college admissions journey, offered by different types of institutions and offering different kinds of benefits. Early action is typically, though not exclusively, offered by large public institutions. They're dealing with a high volume of students, and they love to get a large chunk of their applications processed in advance of the regular deadlines in January or sometimes February. Those deadlines are the same for early action as for early decision, November 1. They are flexible because they are not binding. So it's very important that you read the fine print on the early decision plan where you are planning to apply, most of them will allow you, and they explicitly state that you are able to apply to other early programs if they are not binding. That, however, doesn't allow for the restricted early action. So the restricted early action is for a private university. There's only, I think, 6 or 7 different schools in the country that do that kind of a program for the admissions options. And you are at a fork in the road on November 1st, choosing between early decision binding commitment to Brown, Cornell, Columbia, UPenn, et cetera, or a restricted early action plan, which is only offered in the Ivy League by Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Also offered by Stanford, also offered by a few other schools outside the Ivy Plus and Ivy League. But for our purposes today, think about HYP is REA. The other Ivies are an ED plan, which is a binding plan. I hope that helps.
I definitely think it did, because we just had somebody ask us about which Ivies participate in ED and which ones are restrictive early action. So you're going on that one.
In your mind.
There you go. So somebody asked us, so this is sort of going back to the SAT scores.
Yeah.
So does it mean that I have to have a 1570/80 to apply to Ivy? If I have a 1540, which seems like the average ACT scores of colleges in the chart, do I have a chance?
Yeah, everyone has a chance. So, and your applications are evaluated holistically. As we look statistically at admit rates, what we are kind of tailoring our advice and guidance towards is that your best chances of admission are where you meet the qualifications of other students from the previous year who were in the top 25% of accepted students. And increasingly now, it used to be, 1560 to 1570. Now it's 1570 to 1580 for that top 25% of students. Then there is the next 25% of students that have scores that are below that 1570, 1580 line. And so if you are a student who's scored a 1540, you've tested over and over again, you've hit your limit, either in, my scores aren't improving, no matter how I do these composite scores, this is where we are. Or I've had students who are just done. They're like, I can't do this one more time. Great. Then, up until now, we've been able to make the choice of test optional and whether we submit a score or not. But going forward, we're not going to have that flexibility. So we make, you do the best you can, and that's your score, and it's one piece of your whole application that is being evaluated. They're also looking for standout accomplishments in the fields, either of your academic study or the skills and talents that you have that are maybe separate from your academic area of study. So there's all kinds of ways to stand out. And many, many, many students are going to have those high scores. And there are students all the time who do not have a 4.0 or do not have a 1580 who are admitted to the school as well. So yes, you still do have a chance of being accepted.
Awesome. So we have a couple questions in here asking us to speak about specific schools. And unfortunately, that's not something we'll be able to do tonight. Of course, there's a ton of schools, and this webinar would be like 6 hours long if we did. But we do recommend you book that one-on-one consultation, and we can do a further deep dive on your specific questions related to those schools. So letters of recommendation. We have a couple questions in here of individuals asking us if it has to be from a teacher, for example. An individual asked us if it can be a professor that helped them through the research. Another individual asked if it could be from a dean or a principal from previous years or the current year.
Yeah. And so the general guidance, again, this would take a one-on-one session to be able to look at the school, the requirements, your background, and decide what makes sense. And that's what we do as college counselors here at Quad. What the general guidance is that you need 2 teacher recommendations. And then some schools do allow for supplemental letters of recommendation where you can submit that amazing stellar letter from a professor who supervised your research. And that can be very compelling. Some of my Stanford admits over the years who've been accepted in the REA pool, which is super competitive, did have that kind of connection, sometimes with a Stanford faculty member that they'd done research with, sometimes with faculty at other institutions. And Stanford is one of those schools that invites outside letters in addition to the 2 high school letters. There's a lot of variables to balance here, so it's not one size fits all advice. But in general, pending strong academic performance and all other factors being equal, it's really good to have a STEM teacher and a non-STEM teacher, and to have those have been very recent classroom experiences in junior year.
And I just want to drop a little reminder that if our audience takes a peek in the chat, I've actually shared 4 different resources. So I've shared a blog on how to write a resume for college, how to ask for a letter of recommendation, starting a personal statement, and then how to ace your Ivy League interviews. So we want to make sure that we leave you with as much information as possible.
Absolutely. And I'll also just add in there, as a alumni interviewer with decades of experience interviewing prospective Harvard applicants, one of the main criteria that we were tasked with evaluating was a student's intellectual capabilities. So this is not academic performance in school. It is not test-taking abilities, which are all good indicators of academic skill set. But this was, an applicant's ability to carry on a sustained intellectual conversation about their area of interest, and demonstrably to show that they had pursued that in a variety of ways. There were a lot of other factors that we were also evaluating, and Harvard is a school that pays very close attention to the network of alumni interviewers and clubs around the country, and how those clubs are evaluating the students for that given year from their area. So it's a very highly developed system that is really important in the application process. And I remember when I was going through as an applicant and I was being dropped off by my parents at this law office in downtown Baltimore, where my hometown is. And I was so nervous and, very intimidated and everything. And my alumni interviewer set me at ease. We had a great conversation. I assume it went well because I got in. But we talked. It was supposed to be like a 20-minute interview, and we talked for close to an hour. And finally, I'm like, I don't want to take any more of your time. I'm going to go now. So I really do encourage you, where you do have the opportunity, to take advantage of that.
I'd love to add on, this isn't necessarily in the chat, but I think would be helpful for our audience. In terms of speaking to the network, so the Ivy League networks for all these colleges and universities, do you think that would be helpful when it comes to choosing a school? And is that a network that you think they could reach out to?
Can you say that again?
So in terms of reaching out to, alumni from let's say they want to go to Harvard. So if a student was interested and wanted to know more information, are there networks within these universities that they can reach out to for more information before even applying, and when they're building that list? Not usually.
The alumni networks and clubs are usually for the support of the alumni. They'll have the admissions teams will come to each area where there's a club and give presentations. And that's really a great time for prospective students to interact. There may be like open houses, meet and greet kinds of things that clubs put on at their discretion. The ones that I was a part of did that just around admissions time.
Awesome. Well, thanks for answering that.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Going back to our audience questions, we have time for maybe one more. So there's a couple questions in here that are very case specific. Involving sports recruits and how that kind of relates to EAED. Just a couple questions about certain, if somebody was interested in a pre-med program and sort of the summer programs and activities they could take. For these particular questions, as much as we'd love to get to them tonight, We won't necessarily have the time, so I recommend either booking that consultation, or we actually have a ton of resources available online. We have an entire database of summer programs and activities that might be able to help out with that. Let's see. Do you see any other question in here that you'd love to answer, Jennifer? I feel like I'm just throwing them at you.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, so there's some really detailed questions here about EA and REA impacts, and that's where I was saying it's really important to read the fine print, because most schools, if you're going to do an REA, they will allow you to do an EA to a public institution, and there are some exceptions to the general principle that early action is primarily for large public universities. There are some private institutions that offer it, UChicago, SMU, et cetera. And there are, it's very, very important that you follow to the letter the guidance that's being given to you by the institution, and avoid any kind of misstep that would nullify your eligibility for the REA program. In general, the summer programs, it's very important to be leveraging the time in your summer to pursue your research interests, to engage in internships, if that's a direction that makes sense for your major, and to be building that compelling narrative for showing a school that you're really serious about your intended field of study. If you're pre-med, you've got to have hundreds of hours of hospital volunteering. You need to be doing research in your field of study, which is going to be different from your pre-med program. So those are two very different things, totally different webinar, see our YouTube channel. But that you will really want to leverage those summer months to be continuing to grow and demonstrate that intellectual engagement, passion, and capability, so that the Ivy League is going to read your application and know that you would not just survive the Ivy League undergraduate experience, but really thrive there.
With that being said, I think this is a perfect time to bring tonight's webinar to a close. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, audience, for being with us here tonight. Please keep an eye out on your email for a link to schedule your own consultation, or please feel free to reply to the email and ask any questions you may have after the webinar. With that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and thank you.